Almost there, almost there. But right now, we're taking a look at some of our weather around the Charlotte Metro. Carowinds looking pretty nice out there, little cloud cover. And for that, it might be a good time to go there for the park. Maybe celebrate a birthday for a 3-year-old.
Ooh.
Chris Mulcahy
That was
back
hyper-specific.
here
Why haven't I already said that?
in the Live Impact studio now. And little JT, had a good time this weekend,
Sure
long
did.
weekend. Welcome
Yeah.
back.
We went on Monday, and that's when little lad turned 3, and
Oh, the little lad.
it was 98 degrees.
Wow.
It was nice. Luckily, they have water parks there, so that made things so much better,
Oh,
So good. Yeah, keeping cool because especially now we need to keep cool. It is pretty intense out there with this heat.
Yeah, and we're going to have a break from the heat, technically. We're still going to have a real feel that's close to about that 100-degree mark, but it is going to be a little bit better. I have a high of 93 for today. But now we are shifting our focus, a different weather alert. It comes with many different faces. Could be heat. We've even had it before for code red air quality, but this time it's a double duo, and all these are storm-driven. We're talking about severe storms. We have a low to a medium threat across the area. That's mainly for damaging winds, but then also number 2, moved it to a color orange there for flooding as well, mainly flash flooding. And that has been primarily the biggest story across the United States from what happens to the tragedy in Texas. I was actually just as a quick note, I actually just was looking at the river gauges along the Guadalupe River around, is it Kerrville?
Kerrville.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say you're saying that right. It went from 1.84 feet to over 34 feet from 6 a.m. until 7:45.
So fast.
So fast. And you oftentimes don't realize that, hey, you could have a lot of rain in one area, but rivers, you could have a lot of rain in multiple different spots. It has to flow down. So as it's flowing down, it's picking up the heavier rain from upstream, and then that flows, and then that can compound there, and then debris can block channels, and then that starts to overcome its banks. And that's kind of the compound there. And I'm not saying that we're going to see anything like that in the short term, but I'll never forget when I was there as a live reporter for the Hidden Night Campground. That happened back in November. There was the flash flood watches that were in effect beforehand for the amount of rain that we saw, and they built. The more rain that you see in the days before, the more runoff that there can be. Now, good news for us, we've been fairly dry, but the reason why we're going to go weather alert really over the coming days, and here I'll bring up actually the extended forecast to really show you the magnitude, is because of that flood threat. I think especially the rain that we see today could be compounded in tomorrow, and if some areas see 2 to 4 inches of rain today and they do it again tomorrow, then you're looking at an issue. And we don't need any more flooding. I'm hoping for the best case in scenario, but we are looking at some decently heavy rain across the area, so that's one thing that we're tracking. But I do want to make this point before we go into your full futurecast. If you receive a flash flood warning on your phone, that means that it's a considerable flash flood warning. We have general flash flood warnings all the time. That just means that, hey, water's rapidly rising, over 6 inches in many areas. That means it could be some localized flooding, some nuisance flooding. When you receive an alert on your phone, tier 2 of 3, that means that it's considerable, life-threatening, and threatening your property. Doesn't mean that necessarily it's at your house, but someone in your little GIS, the global coordinates nearby, is under that considerable flash flood warning. So you gotta take those ones seriously if you're being alerted on your phones. And the worst case scenario is the flash flood emergency. And we saw a bunch of those, over a dozen from Helene. We saw one in Union County and Chesterfield County back in Florence, kind of keep putting this in perspective. And what happened in Texas, they were under a flash flood emergency. But the problem with these, if you don't have your cell phone, as many girls might have been at a camp, might have not have got them. So, but if you do have your cell phone, likely here in the Charlotte area, I'm hoping you do not get alerted anytime over the next couple of days, but we are alert that this could be a possibility. So I just want to get that out of the way, kind of some housekeeping before we fully get into your forecast, because boy, do we have an interesting setup, because check it out. We have a slow-moving pattern. We've talked about the stationary front time in and time again, and that can just squiggle and wiggle around, as my nickname goes, quasi-stationary front.
That's right.
That is going to be the case and scenario really by day 2 especially. But we're driving up a lot of moisture. Today actually could have just as hot of a heat index as we had yesterday or the day before, but we're 5 degrees cooler because the moisture is much higher for the afternoon. So that's one thing. Number 2, because of how hot and humid it is and a nearby front to lift things up, we have a scattered severe thunderstorm chance for today and tomorrow before it starts to drop off on Friday. There's the slightest chance that you don't really have much going on, that we might end the weather alert for your Friday, the way things are trending. But as of right now, we're going to keep it in there, because if you have a couple of days of flash floods, and even one small thunderstorm could be all the case on Friday. Again, I don't think you're going to see anything like you saw in New Mexico and in Texas. I'm sure you guys will show the house floating down the river at one point.
Oh, yeah, that was an amazing wild video of that house.
And that was from flash flood warnings the day before, and then you got more rain in the same areas that just allowed everything to swell up. And we have constantly been saying this. Helene would not have been Helene if you didn't have the predecessor rain event. There was already rivers that were at major flood stage before Helene hit, and then it moved to historical. So the more rain you have the days preceding is the better chance. That's why Charlotte is in a really good spot here. Yes, we do have a medium threat for flash flooding or flooding in general, but we would be under a high to extreme if we've been seeing rain for days, but that hasn't been the case. Here's a look at our futurecast. It's right about 3 o'clock that I think that we really start to see things starting to take over up in the mountains and the foothills. There are some signs that you could see a storm as early as 2 o'clock across Charlotte. That's a lower chance, but it's still there, so anytime in the afternoon anything goes. But a lot of us might be waiting until the evening to see these storms, and look what happens. Everything kind of conjoins together. I think if you're going to see a severe thunderstorm warning, it's mainly in the mid-afternoon to the early evening. If you're going to see any flash flood warnings, there's a higher chance late afternoon through the evening, because this is 7 o'clock. At this point, you could see a couple hours of rain in this case and scenario sitting in one spot, because these aren't moving too much. I think they might move at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And then oftentimes you have a storm that needs to exhaust itself, but then when it's constantly kind of feeding itself into one big mass, they can sit even longer, and that's kind of what's happening here. Eventually it fades out and we'll have a chance for some more isolated nature, but it's really the continuous hours of rain that will up your flooding potential. So that's day 1. Day 2, I think it's really between about 3 and 9 that we see this, seeing it really starting to flourish west of I-77 by about 4 to 5. We see the same thing, things kind of combine together. It's called clusters of storms by the early evening, and by 9 o'clock most of it's out of here. And then for your Friday here, I'll stop things. You don't really have too much. You're only seeing a couple of storms, so this is the reason why I said we might end the weather alert a day early, but it just depends, because if we're looking at if you get a lot of flooding, sometimes they can actually aid more storms, like drought feeds drought. Sometimes heavy rain can feed heavy rain, just depending. So that's a look at the near term. Let's go through some of the rain totals. Now, the 7-day outlook that we have a little bit closer to home, surprisingly, isn't really that high. It's not really picking up on the exact near term, and sometimes it takes a second for this to load up. But we're seeing some values about 1 to 2 inches of rain that could possibly happen here. We'll just move on because it's taking too long.
Got stuck.
Yeah, it got stuck. Well, because it loads data from the National Weather Service. It's called a KML file. So sometimes it doesn't do it as quick, especially when I'm kind of on a subcomputer logged into another computer.
Right.
But let's see. Let's try to bring up the rain totals. There we go. All right, so this one right here, not showing as much, but it still has through tomorrow afternoon upwards, check that out, about 2 to 3 inches of rain over in Wadesboro. Across a couple of days. But there's ones that are even more extreme. This one right here that was the model that I first showed you, this one actually has upwards to 2 to 4 inches of rain today alone. So look at this. It has 3 to 4 inches of rain by the end of this evening. I'm not saying for sure that's going to happen. However, I do recall the last time that we had a big rain, it was calling for 3.6 inches of rain in Boone. Boone got 3.2. So sometimes sometimes it is actually very accurate. I really just like to use this that it picks up on anomalies and sometimes the worst case scenario, and I think that's the case. So I think the best case scenario is you don't really see too much rain. You see less than a quarter inch, and then you say, what's all the hoopla about? Worst case scenario is that you have a heavy downpour for a couple of hours, and they're getting some of those totals up to about 3 to 4 inches. And oftentimes it takes a stream and a creek and a river to really get the intense flash flooding. We wouldn't be talking about this Texas event and that a devastating event that happened at that campground if it wasn't along a big river. And at the Hidden Night campground, we wouldn't have been talking about that if it wasn't next to a big river. It always takes kind of water to make more water. Everything kind of flows down. Yes, you can oftentimes have a bunch of water like what we happened in North Carolina that you can lead some flash flooding. But I also want to leave one more note with that. 3 of the 4 deaths here in North Carolina from that flooding were people that were trying to drive through floodwaters. So I know it sounds silly and rhymey, turn around, don't drown, but over half of the deaths that happen in flooding, now Texas outside of that statistic, were from people using vehicles trying to challenge the water or oftentimes driving over bridges where that water is way too high because many people are swept away with the bridge as the water takes it away. So just more of a somber tone only because of what's been happening across the country. The fact is, since 4th of July, we've now seen houses floating down rivers, one of the deadliest flooding events you're ever going to hear about most likely in your lifetime. These type of things happen from tropical systems. For a typical flash flooding event like what we saw here, you do not hear about this that often. And now that we've had our turn here in North Carolina from a tropical depression, that's why we're just taking this seriously, because you do have the event that slow-moving thunderstorms could lead to excessive rain. I'm saying 3 to 4, but truly, if something sits long enough, you're talking about much more than that. So I just want everyone to stay weather alert, especially over the next couple of days. Sure. After that, you're pretty much back to standard issue summertime heat, humidity, and hey, it could storm later on in the day.
All right. Thank you. I mean, and it is, we've had these conditions and these events, you know, New Mexico, Texas, North Carolina now that you've mentioned. And yeah, it is rhymey, but something that at least in the time, you know, turn around, don't drown.
Yeah.
Well, as we always
and we see the road collapsing.
We always, like, around here, if there's even significant rain, our photog always catches at least one car that's stuck.
Sure enough.
Yep.
It happens every time.
Because it only takes a foot or an inch to move a vehicle?
No, it's usually an inch of moving water. Technically, it's 3 inches to 6 inches can knock a person down, carry them away. It's usually about a foot to 18 inches that can move a vehicle. Up to 18 to 24 can move a bus. Like you saw how fast some of the water was moving, carrying houses, and cars are just bobbing in the water. It's frightening. If flooding is the most deadly severe weather event you can have. Number one is heat, but I'm talking about for storms, and you saw it. There's nothing you can really say to make the situation better. It's just really crazy, some of the images that you're seeing, and it breaks my heart what some of those girls and people went through in Texas.
Absolutely. So we always are constantly thinking about them, and we have Samaritan's Purse out there and Billy Graham Rapid Response out there. So North Carolinians coming through for, people that are across the country pretty much.
And I want to make one more note. That event probably wouldn't have happened if you didn't have kind of the page flipped because of Barry. Now, Tropical Storm Barry was nothing. It made landfall in Mexico, dissipated, and became the remnants. But sometimes what happens is when you have a tropical system move in, it locks in more tropical moisture. And what did we just have here in the Carolinas? You already had flash flooding, deadly flash flooding from Chantal. Chantal was just a basic tropical storm, but you saw the rains that it can produce. We have a lot more moisture. It's been more humid recently, but it sets the tone. It changes the atmosphere. It increases what's called P-watts, which is precipitable water to the atmosphere, and that is pretty much how much rain you would get if you completely pretty much wrung the atmosphere out like a sponge. Those are the highest that they've been all year long. Texas had the highest that they've been all year long. So oftentimes it's the indirect impacts of a tropical system that can sometimes lead to the worst case scenario. And again, I don't think we're going to see anything. Texas had much worse scenarios and a lot more rain preceding that. It's just that I think a lot of people seeing this, you have to realize that especially for flash flooding, if you're being warned for it, take it seriously. Don't drive through it. Just be warned. We've seen what the outcomes could be, and I don't want anyone watching WCNC Plus to fall a victim to that.
All right, Chris Mulcahy, water is so powerful.
Yeah, it is.
All right. In the Live Impact studio, thanks for bringing us the latest on your forecast as we are weather alert through at least Thursday. Maybe some light at the end of the week. We'll lift that.
Better by the
I
weekend.
also want to note, too, you mentioned relief efforts for Texas. Right now on our
Yes.
website and our mobile app, we have a whole list of ways you can help out, different trusted
Good.
organizations that you can donate to help relief efforts down there.
Great.
Yes.
WCNC.com.
Yep, or on our app.
Or on the app.
Wherever you prefer.
Right here,
Yep.
where you have the WCNC Plus app.